Hey everybody, welcome back to the Woodworking Talk Show. If you haven't already done so, don't forget to sign up for my free monthly woodworking newsletter over at notesfromsteve.com. It's got tips, tricks. Who doesn't want tricks? Cool projects from the community and kind of a rambling letter from me that may or not sort of kind of be about woodworking. With well over 500 million views, that's with a B. It's hard to even imagine. Matthias Wandel maintains the largest woodworking channel on YouTube. Okay, so get this, Matthias, I was doing a little counting on your channel. You have posted 126 videos that have over 1 million views each. Oh, and 3 more on your second channel, your lesser channel. That's mind-boggling. He posted his first video on April 9, 2007, entitled simply Slippery Road Conditions. It's got to be my personal favorite. You should remake that video. You ever think about remaking that video? It's classic.
Gotta wait for the right conditions.
Since then, he has become the foremost expert on making his own woodworking machines, including, okay, bear with me, I'm probably going to leave some out. A homemade jointer, a table saw, 3 different belt sanders, a homemade lathe, a sawmill, a bunch of bandsaws, including most recently a huge 26-inch bandsaw, a computer-controlled box joint jig, a slot mortising machine, a horizontal boring machine, a homemade air cleaner, and a couple of super impressive pantorouters, all with highly detailed plans so you can build them yourself. And these aren't just demonstrations. He actually uses these as his primary tools in his shop. But that only scratches the surface. He's designed and built countless machines for use outside the shop. Things like a baby rocking machine, a self-driving scaffold, I like that one, an apple grinder where everybody had to ask, what is an apple grinder? A pipe organ, a Jenga pistol, a wasp sucking machine, and an air raid siren. Matthias is an engineer who's developed computer programs to answer questions and run experiments in his home and his shop. He does construction and home improvement projects as well as making and building fine furniture. His channel features solid woodworking tips and tricks. There's more of those tricks right there. He makes wooden gears, marble machines, tests airflow and fans, and builds incredible mazes to test mice. Those are also pretty hilarious videos. I think you get the idea at this point. If I kept going, there'd be no time left for a conversation. Oh, and on top of all of this, he's like really keyed into YouTube. I've always enjoyed our conversations about the inner workings of YouTube, kind of the analytics numbers and what makes for a viral video. And he stays current with what other channels are up to. And, oh, most notably though, he's also a 2-time guest on my Chad and Steve Have a Podcast. We're going to have you on again pretty soon. And, oh, finally, we're coming up on our 10th anniversary of our Skype for Woodworkers April Fool's collaboration video.
Wow, has it been that long? Oh my
God. Anyways, Matthias, welcome to the show.
Thank you. That was a nice intro.
I think that just about covered at least some of it, and you do a lot of stuff over there. You know what I forgot to mention? That you never applied for your... Did you ever apply for your gold play button?
I was just thinking about that recently. Is like, yeah, I guess that it's a relatively unusual thing, but I'm just like...
Well, actually, you would have...
Be, you know, maybe a decade from now it might be a useful memento, but right now it's like, what would I do with it?
You've got 3 buttons coming to you. You've got a silver play, gold play, and a silver play for your Matthias Random Stuff channel.
Yeah.
That's a lot, but you're I always kind of think of you as you're the anti-YouTuber, and you're the most successful anti-YouTuber. You do everything that they tell you not to do on YouTube.
Speaking of, I'm sure you watch Veritasium.
Oh yeah, I see his most recent video.
So, you know, that inspired me to think, yeah, I should maybe think about my titles a bit more.
Yeah.
Anyways, I went back and changed a couple of old ones, and then I looked at my subscriptions page, and it seems everybody watches him because suddenly all the titles of all the new videos I saw were rather clickbaity. I'm like, God!
It's so true. I did the exact same thing. You know what I did is I spent like 2 hours on Monday or whenever that video came out, And in case you haven't seen this video, anybody watching or listening to this, Veritasium had a video on why clickbait works. And exactly, he kind of separates the difference between good clickbait, which is just an enticing title, but the content pays off, it delivers on that, and kind of the bad clickbait, which doesn't deliver. You know, you've got like boobs in the thumbnail and that sort of thing that isn't even in the video, you know, just to get people to click. So his focus is on the good type of clickbait and how an enticing title can just improve a video enormously.
Well, you know, once I like seeing all those rather clickbaity, and they may be good clickbaity, but still all these deliberately made to be intriguing titles. You know what? I didn't want to watch any of those videos.
Well, that's why you're the
so
anti.
it's like,
Yeah.
I think clickbait, you know, just like a university degree used to give you a big advantage before most of the population got one. I think titles like that, people will grow immune to it. It also sort of reminds me, you know, whenever you read like some news article from, you know, LA Times or whatever, at the bottom you see all this, you know, I think they call them chum boxes or something like that, where you have all these rather very intriguing things in there. And, you know, I used to click on some of those because they were intriguing, and I was always disappointed. And since then I've learned it's like, don't even look at the links at the bottom of the article.
Yeah, and Derek mentioned that in his video. It's like a lot of us say that, well, we're immune to clickbait, or we won't do that, but it still works because a lot of people still click that stuff. And so what I did...
Well, so those articles, those clickbaity links at the bottom of those articles used to work on me to some extent. And now, you know, it's just like we've become ad blind. It's like, you know, blinky text used to give you emphasis, and now it's like, you know, well, I mean, things have changed a bit, but you've learned it's like if there's something animated, it's not important.
Yeah, so I have TubeBuddy, this thing where you could A/B test titles, thumbnails, descriptions, all that sort of thing. So I just went through like 20 of my videos and did A/B testing. I set it up earlier this week for just titles alone. And I'm curious to see what is going to happen. It goes until it has a significant, what am I trying to say? Until the results are significant. In other words, it'll just keep going until there's a major difference there. And so what I would do, and I've noticed that this works, and we'll see if this confirms it, is say I've got two titles, 5 tips for using a jigsaw. Or you could title that, don't do this thing with your jigsaw. Okay, both of those titles are completely different, but the information might be the same in each video. In the first video, the things you want to do with your jigsaw, there might be information in there of, by the way, don't do this with your jigsaw. But if you emphasize the negative, don't do this, it usually gets way better clicks than here's things to do.
I've had, a video I made way back, was it 3 table saw mistakes to avoid or something like that? Because I had a friend use, and, you know, he made a couple of mistakes with the table saw that, you know, hadn't even occurred to me to make because of, you know, experience. And so I was going to put that in the main video, and then it's like, no, let's put that in a separate video because, you know, that was a little bit more critical of what he did in the shop, whereas I wanted the main video to be more positive. And the second video is like 3 table saw, 3 tricks, 3 mistakes to avoid. Is like, that one's gotten way more views in the main video.
Does it kind of blow you away of how many views your videos get? You are the biggest woodworker on YouTube. When it comes to just sheer amounts of views, nobody has that I found has over 500 million.
That's cumulative views, though. Like,
sure, but nobody, even some of the largest, and I think most people think of large channels, they think of a subscriber count, but to me, the number of people who have actually watched your videos is really kind of the more important metric.
It's sort of subscriber count, like, you know, the subscriber count is also sort of a cumulative metric, and it used to be easier to get subs than it is now.
Yeah.
I think people, like, I don't know, somehow the emphasis is less on subscribing than there used to be, so people are less likely to hit subscribe. So in terms of views I get now, like, I'm down to, you know, 1.2 million a month, which, you know, I used to be at 10 million a month for quite a while. So, and then you like Bourbon Moth, and what's the other guy some of those guys that have just...
Yeah, him and and Blacktail Studio. Those two are killing it. They're like the two most popular woodworking
Yeah,
channels
so
right now.
it makes you kind of wonder about you in terms of building up sort of a business on YouTube, because it's like, what's it worth? Because it used to be having subscribers really meant something because that got you more views, but now it doesn't. And somebody can come seemingly out of nowhere, and that I wasn't even aware of those guys, and suddenly they're way ahead. So
Right.
what sense does it make to, you're not really investing in the future. You really have to look at it as like, how many views do I get now? How much does it pay now? Not what am I building up? It's like, how well does it work now? That's what matters. And the future, that could just disappear like that.
I think Derek mentioned that in his video too, about subscribers and how YouTube changed that a few years ago, because what would happen is when you emphasize subscribers, viewers will come in, watch their subscription feed, they'll go to the sub box, watch those, and then they leave. And they found if they kind of downplayed the whole subscription model in favor of discovery and watch next thing, they could get people to stay on the platform a lot longer.
Yeah, and that also, like, I think it used to be like way back. Remember the first sort of scandal with PewDiePie.
The first one, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what he did wasn't really that bad, but it was sort of the start of cancel culture.
Yeah, and that was also kind of part of the apocalypse too, kind of kicked in.
Yes. So I think at that point they realized, like, okay, we've got these big YouTubers that are too powerful, because if you had a lot of views on your videos, then their videos ranked higher. So basically you got more views because you were big, and you became big because you got views, which basically would have resulted in stagnation to some extent, because it makes it hard for somebody to come from nowhere. So they put a lot more emphasis on, like, how well does the video do versus how much clout do you already have, which I think, my suspicion is the main motivation for that at the time was to make people like PewDiePie less important. Because it's not good for them to have a few mega stars like that can. They'd rather have a lot of small stars so that they're the more powerful one, as opposed to having a few mega stars that can control things.
So one of the phenomenon I've been noticing in the past year, and I don't think there's a name for it yet. We need to coin an expression. I was talking to Chad about this. I was like, is it like subscription bloat or something like that? There's got to be a word for this, where there's these channels that came and got real popular in subscribers fast, like Dad How Do I, where he was getting like 4 million subscribers. He's still getting 60,000 subscribers a month. But his view counts on the individual videos are just low. I mean, super low, like under 20,000 views per video. So, and there's another one. There's like Grandma Skyrim or something. It's this 85-year-old woman who plays Skyrim, and she's got almost like 1 million subscribers, but nobody really watches the videos. So people are subscribing to channels as a form of I like the channel, I like the concept, I like you, but I'm not really going to watch the videos.
Yeah, to me, it's actually realizing how little subscribers matter, because my second channel, the videos lately I've put on that one have gotten as many views as on the main channel, even though it's only got, like, was it 110,000 subs on there, versus almost 1.6 million on the main channel. So your subscriber count really doesn't matter very much. And I used to think of the second channel as, that's where I put the stuff that I didn't consider worthy of the main channel, but I can't really say that that's the smaller channel now in terms of how videos are doing and the view counts on it. So I think going forward, I'll just say if it's woodworking related, it goes on the main channel, and if it's anything else, it goes on the second channel. Because again, the second channel isn't necessarily the smaller channel at this point, even though it's got way fewer cumulative views and way fewer subscribers. In terms of how new videos do on that one, it's doing as good as the main channel, really.
Yeah, because that's when I was in that intro and I said you had 3 videos on your second channel with 1 million views. I think
it's just 2.
I was fudging a little bit because your one has 915,000, but that's going to be 1 million really soon because you posted that video 1 month ago.
Yeah, it's slowed down a bit. It's down to like 5,000 a day. So I'm hoping there's enough summer left, because that's kind of a summer. I'm hoping there's enough summer left to get up to 1 million.
So that was fascinating. It was the best fan placement to move air through your house. And so what you did was you set up a box fan, like a couple different fans, didn't you? Or,
Yeah.
And in different positions, how far to place it against from the window, an open window, which direction should it face? All these things you tested to see where's the optimum spot for it. And I thought it was just fascinating, and apparently a lot of other people did too.
It's a very relatable one because it's a problem that a lot of people think about. I was even approached by one TV program about interviewing for that, but then they never followed through on that. So it sort of has that sort of mainstream appeal to it.
Yeah, because it's something we could all easily do. It doesn't cost us any extra money. You know, if you don't have to go out and buy anything. I've already got the fan now. How can I even improve a fan? You know?
Yeah.
You know what I want to talk about real quick, because I don't think I've ever asked you this before, is were you woodworking as a child? What was your childhood like? Because I know that your dad was a woodworker, and was the rest of your family, were you exposed to all of that early on, and did you just take
my dad, it was the 70s. Things were not as dangerous as they are today. So my dad, I know when we're still in Germany, so this would have been when I was 10 or possibly younger, he'd let me use the workshop on his own. He wouldn't let me use the table saw, but the bandsaw and the drill press I could use without him being there. And I did, tinker around and stuff like that and build stuff, and then moved to Canada. He built up a wood shop again there, and again I was able to do stuff, which I took woodworking in high school just because it was a, quote, arts elective. So even though I didn't learn anything there, it's like I took it because it's like there wasn't very many arts electives that were appealing to me. And that was frustrating in high school because they wouldn't let you really just do stuff.
You already knew everything probably that they would have taught you anyhow. At what point did you decide that you wanted to make engineering your profession?
I never did very well in school up until the last couple of years of high school, when suddenly, in terms of the courses that I could select the courses, and so focus more on courses that I liked and had good teachers, which made, the sciencey sort of stuff was, to me, that sort of stuff is fun. At which point I got good enough grades that I could even consider going to university, which then I did, and I've always enjoyed sort of tinkering and that sort of thing.
What was the degree? What degree did you get? Was that electrical engineering, mechanical engineering?
There's a program called Systems Design Engineering. I started out mechanical engineering. Was a bit disappointed with the attitude of the people in the class.
Really?
But there's another department called Systems Design Engineering, which is kind of, some mechanical, some electrical, some computer. In retrospect, I like to think of it as bullshit engineering, because they're kind of full of themselves. But I knew a bunch of cool people that were in that department, so I switched to that, which I'd like to say that was my second mistake, but I wasn't going to switch again, so I finished that.
What didn't you like about the people in those classes, in those programs?
Well, the first one is sort of a quintessential comment that made it sort of, I was living in residence and, was doing some pencil drawings and stuff like that. I enjoyed that. And I actually did it one that I was very happy with of our cats from back home, just from a photograph. And the guy on my floor, he just looked at it and said, like, I like to keep my tool rigid. Which, is like, what does he mean by that? And the more I thought about it, it's like, the sadder that comment was. But that was kind of, a bit more the attitude. The class name they elected was Orgasmic. I was just like, oh.
We've got a pizza chain out here. I don't know if they're just in California or not. It's just called Pizza Orgasmic. And I thought, I'll bet that was funny for 5 minutes, and now they have to live with that name. Oh, man. So you got a job working for RIM. I know you worked on, do you work on BlackBerry? Is that what you
Yeah, well, it wasn't called BlackBerry. Yeah, the company changed its name to BlackBerry after I left.
Oh, okay. So you were but you were working on PDAs?
Yeah, well, we never did PDA itself. Like, its focus has always been more on the wireless.
Oh, okay.
That wasn't what the company was about initially, but by the time I joined in '93, the focus, the main focus of the company was rapidly switching to wireless.
Yeah.
So I'd like to say I was the last person hired there that wasn't specifically for wireless, because the first project I worked on was actually something not at all wireless.
Huh.
It was for the motion picture industry.
Really?
Yeah.
What was it? What were you
It's
doing?
they called it the Digisync. It was a film barcode reader. So what they started doing is, as things switched over to more electronic, they would shoot the film on negative stock, then scan it all into the computer and edit it, and then from that go back and cut the film stock accordingly. So they'd edit at really low res, like VHS kind of quality, because getting those cuts just right, as we YouTubers know, that it's like, oh no, that's not quite right. Like
Yeah.
let's move it by 5 frames. Okay, that looks better. Can you imagine doing that as you're splicing film stock?
I used to actually splice film. I shot Super 8 film. I don't know if you
Oh.
shot that back in the 80s or early 80s, but right before video was coming out. And then I would get the video cameras. I could check them out from the school library, and then everything switched to video. But yeah, I remember
Yeah.
splicing film. Ugh.
So on 35 millimeter film, along the edge you have like the picture number.
Mm-hmm.
So for motion picture film, they started putting just a little barcode, which essentially was like a footage count. This roll this far in. So then, as they scan it in, the Digisync would read the barcodes and read that into computer files at the same time. Then it edit the film, and then the editing program would spit out a cut list that says, okay, we need to this roll from this point to this point, and cut it like that.
So
And
it could
so
physically
then-
automate it. The physical cutting of the film was automated.
No.
Oh, it
No.
wasn't.
So-
It would just
so-
tell you where.
Because then they'd cut the original film stock, which is precious, precious, precious stuff, and considering the budgets. So then you probably get somebody like with white cotton gloves going through the original film stock, and you'd run it through this barcode reader, and it'll tell you exactly. It's like, this is the point.
Oh,
Cut here, or it'll tell you this is frame footage number, and so you look at the cut list, and without having to like look at the little numbers on the edge of it, it would tell you, yeah, this is the spot. So they'd know where to cut it and splice the film together. So they'd then edit the original negatives, and then from then go on to make the positives for the theaters and whatnot.
wow.
That product, of course, is completely obsolete now.
I was going to say that had to be a short-lived process. Wow.
It had been around from before I started, and
Yeah.
things didn't really go fully digital for
Yeah,
at least another 5-10 years after that.
there were always those transitional products in between things. Do you ever watch the channel Company Man? I don't know if you've ever even heard of that.
No.
It's a guy who just talks about big companies and like the rise and fall of companies and what caused the problem. One of them was on BlackBerry, the rise and fall of BlackBerry and what happened. And I didn't realize they were still making those up until just a few years ago. They were making
Yeah, the
those.
company's actually like
They
it's
couldn't adapt to phone. They were real late on it, getting to smartphones. They were still dedicated to those little PDAs.
Yeah. Well, there was part of part of the attitude was at some point by Mike Lazaridis. It's like now we just have to execute and not screw up, as opposed to this. No, it's a continued race. You keep the paranoid survive is sort of something you hear sometimes. So it's like, okay, we got this great product. That's let's ship. Let's transition into a more stodgy old kind of company. But that worked until Apple and Google got into the market.
Right.
We were pretty safe against the telecoms at the time because they were stodgy old telecoms and they couldn't move very fast. But Apple and Google had both the scale to build a mobile device because you gotta, it takes billions, and they moved faster. So that kind of was the beginning of the end for once those guys got in there.
Right. Were you still doing woodworking while you were working at RIM?
Oh yeah. I even built a few jigs and stuff that I used at work.
Really? Oh.
Yeah.
And at what point did you quit RIM knowing that you wanted to pursue woodworking, or was that at the time when you started YouTube?
I started YouTube because it's like, what am I going to do after RIM? I had another job kind of lined up before I even gave notice. But then as the time came closer, the company that I was wanting to join, they're like, well, things are a bit slow right now. So if you could maybe wait a couple of months. I'm like, yeah, that's fine. And, you know, just exploring other options. So YouTube had just been bought by Google. So it's like, oh, let's play around with that. And the other thing I was playing around with was AdSense. That was kind of hot at the time. In fact, if you Google "quit rich quick," AdSense was one of the things that would come. And some people did do really well. I peaked out at about $100 a day on AdSense. This is before YouTube was making much money. Like AdSense at this point, for me, it's not really returning very much. I've recently spent some time tweaking that.
Are you talking about the YouTube AdSense or the AdSense on your website?
AdSense for websites.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the YouTube ads, that didn't come in until a few years after that.
Yeah. And do you still run ads on your website?
Yeah, and I was just, I was actually doing some work recently to make the website more mobile friendly because, you know, with these damn phones, which, you know, the narrow screens, so to make it, make the layout a little bit more responsive to that.
Right.
And then it's like, okay, and then, you know, let's rejigger the ads. But what's been discouraging is, I look at the ads and it's, at least for the ads that I see, it's the Ted's Woodworking scam.
God, yeah.
In various forms and other scams. Like I was just looking at John Heist's website and there's an ad that was for plug this thing into your wall and it cuts your electricity bill by 90%, you know, like clearly a scam. So I guess the scams are just simply the most profitable because they don't have to deliver anything real. So they can bid higher, and so that's been kind of discouraging. It's like, okay, do I really want to peddle Ted's Woodworking or
it's frustrating.
That sort of scam is like, oh.
Well, I've noticed a huge surge in Ted's Woodworking in the last few months, and it's hard to do anything about it because that's the number one selling product on ClickBank. ClickBank is the service that runs that whole, you know, what do they call it? They call it like affiliate sales, basically, is what they call it. But it's a thing where it's kind of a pyramid scheme. But I've been noticing for like a month ago, luckily I've got all those block words, you know, I'm sure you do too on YouTube. And it was like wood glut and what's the other one? There was a couple of these things that all lead to Ted's Woodworking. All spam leads to Ted's Woodworking. Yeah. And I was just getting like hundreds of those on my channel a day. I mean, it was just like flooding through there. And so then I thought, well, I'm going to get this Ted's Woodworking newsletter because as soon as I started doing a newsletter, it's really weird because they're like monitoring everything that I'm doing and trying to copy it. And so they literally copied one of my sales video, I mean, literally word for word, and put it on their website. Then
with a different person reading it?
Oh, it's a totally different guy, but he's like used language. I actually made a side-by-side video comparing it, and I was like, "You're not going to believe." I'll have to send that to you so you can take a look at it. But so then they start sending out this newsletter, and now they're calling the guy Steve. And so the letter comes, and what they're trying to do is create brand confusion.
Wasn't it always Steve McGrath or something? It was
Ted McGrath. This is the quote Ted, which is
so now the scam will be Steve's Woodworking,
which is it just sucks. And so the newsletters come out and they say Steve wants you to have this, and Steve is talking about this, and Steve apparently is the actor in this video. So we're trying to figure out what to do about it. There's not much you can do about it because ClickBank is huge, and this has been their best-selling product for like 15 years. And it's just it's so frustrating. I remember they took down, I had a video on my channel like 10 years ago talking about Ted's Woodworking, and I investigated it. I found out that Ted is just a stock photo. It's called Happy Man Stock Photo, you know, and the address doesn't exist. None of this stuff is real. And they sent me like a cease and desist thing on my website. And then they're like, we're going to take down your whole website and everything. I just took it down because I'm like, I don't have time to deal with this. I figure at this point, you know, let the buyer beware, whatever. If you want to buy into this stuff.
Oh, so that's why. Well, but you've like reorganized your whole website. I thought just with the reorganization, you didn't bother keeping that.
No, I took it down because that was a long time ago. I took that thing down after I got that note from them. It was
one guy approached me about, or emailed me about what I thought about that because he's setting up a website for affiliate, you know, to Pebble affiliate links essentially, and he's got several of promising ones with ClickBank, especially the Ted's Woodworking. What do I think of it? It's like, well, it's a scam, but just be aware that basically anything on ClickBank is probably a scam. So be aware, like you're peddling scams. Simple as that.
Right, and you're not going to make much money because there's thousands of people who are trying to sell this exact same stuff, and they don't know what it is, and they're all they forward the same spam. I even get them, they'll email me saying, hey, I've got this product. We would love to put it in the description of your videos. And I'm like, clearly you haven't seen my video.
Oh, sometimes when I get approached like that, it's like, it sort of smells of that. And I'm like, oh, and by the way, I don't do Ted's Woodworking scam.
Yeah. Well, I think you even took down your contact information from your YouTube channel too, didn't you?
That's yeah. I get approached so much. I still get approached a lot. So maybe it's kind of the second channel. Like I get approached by multiple things a day.
Yeah.
I'm wondering maybe I should just okay, if they send me the product and I don't do what they ask for, it's like what's their recourse?
What are they going to do?
Just get a bunch of these products and make a sarcastic video about them.
That's not a bad idea. I don't know where they come from, but I can always tell the ones, especially right off the bat, when they start with "Hello, dear." I don't know why they start that way. Do you get those? Hello,
well,
dear.
That's because they have this address list and they just sent it to everybody. It's not they sent it to you.
But why dear? Hello, dear. That's the strangest opening. I think it's because it's
Mr.
translated.
Could be offensive because, what if your pronoun is something else?
Yeah, I guess that's the case. Oh. When did you start making your own tools? What was the first power tool, wood shop tool that you made?
Well, I started with jigs, so I've built a tenon jig, my first tenon jig. I just didn't want to buy the Delta tenon jig. I built that, maybe 2001?
It so long before YouTube.
That might be going way, way back. I'd have to look on my website. Like this is way before YouTube.
Yeah.
And then my first box joint jig, the computer controlled one, that was 2003. Which was superseded by the geared one because I actually prefer things that don't need a computer. So then when I started, when I moved in 2007, after that I built a slot mortar before that. I built my slot mortars, the first one in 1998. I think the tenon jig would have been around by then already too, because those kind of go together. The box joint jig, the very first one was in 2003. Then in 2008, I built the router-based slot mortar, so the one that doesn't require this fancy XY table that I had. And then in terms of machines, I guess the slot mortar you could count as a machine. Then the first bandsaw was 2010, and then the pantorouters was also 2010, and 2011 was the jointer and another bandsaw. So around that was kind of peak in terms of creativity, in terms of like creating new things, because I wasn't making videos so much at the time, which really sped up making things. And plus I had, I was single, so I had a lot more time than now.
What do you consider your pantorouter kind of your crowning achievement as far as woodworking machines go? That and the bandsaws. All of the bandsaws, yeah. And each bandsaw just gets better and better, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's when I built the first one, it was really like, is this going to work? And every bandsaw since then is like, well, I know it's going to work. And like the 26-inch one that I built, I kind of like the last two I built were just kind of refinements on it. I guess the 26-inch one, I built the frame out of like 2x material, like 2x6, 2x8 kind of. Which is something that I hadn't done before, just because at that scale the boards wasn't optimal, and a couple of tweaks to the building, but it's like, as far as I'm concerned, it's like it's as good as I can make it. Like like I can't think of better ways of doing the things that I've done on it. It's just minor improvements. Is it better than a store-bought version? Is there anything that a store-bought bandsaw would have that yours doesn't? Well, some of the bigger ones, like to have a crank to move the blade guide up and down, that would be a nice thing to have, which I can't really do with wood very well. A steel table is nice because it doesn't, it can take a lot more abuse. Have you thought about incorporating a steel table? I've thought about putting a piece of steel on top, but it hasn't been important enough. Yeah. And then of course bigger motors, because like yeah, like this 3/4 horsepower motor is powerful enough for what I do, and I already have it, so I use that sort of thing.
Are there any tools you just wouldn't make? They're just not worth the trouble?
A drill press.
A drill press, yeah.
Yeah, that's. I thought about it from time to time. Maybe I will still, but it's like this mechanism of the quill that travels up and down
Oh,
while it spins that's some machine parts. Table saw is also another one that to do it well requires some machine parts.
well, you did
Although,
make a table saw.
yeah, based on a circular saw. John Heist has built a really good homemade table saw, but like he used the arbor from an actual table saw because that's one of the key machine parts that you need. He has a depth and tilt adjustment mechanism, but that's really hard to get right out of wood. So I don't use a homemade table saw, and I don't use a homemade drill press.
Right. What's your best selling one or plans as far as people wanting to make their own?
The bandsaws and the pantorouters.
Or you think that? Oh, the pantorouters too. That seems like that one looks so complicated to make to me. Wow, that's amazing.
Well, the thing is, if you want something like a pantorouter, like the options are to buy my plans and build it, or redesign it yourself, or buy one for over $1,000.
Do you think that people should make their own tools, or if they're in woodworking, that it's just worth a shot to just try it, or is it just a special kind of mentality that you need?
It depends on if you want to, you should. If you don't, you shouldn't. I get these emails from time to time. It's like, how long does it take and how much does it cost to build a bandsaw?
Sure.
And what I read out of that is like, oh, bandsaws are so expensive, but I want one. Building one is an obstacle that I must overcome. And how big an obstacle is this to overcome one to get a cheaper bandsaw? So these are people that don't really want to build one, which is to say they're not into that sort of thing, which is to say they probably wouldn't be very successful at it.
They're gonna have a bad day.
Yeah, like they just don't think of that way. It's like, well, I could do this way. It's like, yeah, he's done it this way. I bet you I could do this part better. Or it's like, oh, this is cool. I want to try this. Or as opposed to like, okay, let's assemble the kit kind of thing. Even though it's not a kit, but it's just like, let's just slog through it because I want this thing, not because I want to build it.
Right, like putting together an IKEA furniture or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think that's true with probably a lot of woodworking too, like even hand cutting dovetails or something. It's like, oh, all right, I guess I'll learn how to do it. And then, well, you don't really have to if you don't want to. If it's something you enjoy, go for it.
Yeah, and the dovetails, like if you just put a bunch of screws in the corner, as long as they're not pocket hole screws, that'll be just as strong, really.
Yeah.
Like if you put a bunch of long screws into the end grain side by side, actually John Heist did a sort of a funny video of like steel dovetails, it had this silhouette view of like a bunch of screws next to each other. Because it's like, yeah, if you put a bunch of screws next to each other, you pre-drill them so you don't split the wood, and they're like, 3 inches long. It's like, those will hold really good, and they'll probably be stronger than the dovetail.
Yeah, they do. Even on, knockdown furniture, you can buy a lot of times they're assembled that way with just long screws. They're pre-drilled. So all you got to do is put them into the end grain. And that's just like pressed wood. And I think the idea there is that, well, for the amount of stress it's going to be under, it's okay. It's good enough. If you make a desk, you're not going to be subjecting it to a lot of forces, really. It just kind of sits there. So I think,
it's just how many moves does that sort of furniture survive? That's the limiting
well,
factor.
that's the thing, yeah. And that's why I think a lot of times that, unfortunately, we've kind of have this mindset of disposable furniture that we buy from places like IKEA, and it's fine for an apartment for a while, and then you move on and it's starting to show signs of wear, and you set it out on the curb hoping somebody will take it with your free sign on it, and they never do, and then it ends up in a landfill. So I think your most popular videos, though, are your mouse challenges.
Yes, those are
wow.
Completely separate from the woodworking stuff. There's very little cross-pollination between the mouse videos and the woodworking videos.
Yeah, you probably have a lot of audience who just want to see the mouse videos. They're really funny. They're really well made, and I love that you add little sound effects and
It's so much work.
Yeah, it is. How small a hole can a mouse get through? And oh my God, you kill it on that thumbnail because it shows this mouse like squeezing through this tiny hole. And you're just like, I'm rooting for you, mouse. Get in there.
Yeah, yeah. And then like just having the shrew, which looks like a small mole, showing up, that made for a bit of a plot twist.
That's
But
right.
yeah, when I shot that, I had the footage from it, and I'm like, yeah, this is okay. And then, okay, as I'm starting to add the sound effects, and the best idea I had was the balloon, the rubbing the balloon for the squeezing through. And once I started putting the sounds in, I was like, this is so funny.
You probably had no idea that the wasp sucking machine was going to be your fourth most popular video.
I actually, well, that was the wasp sucking machine XL, I think is the,
XL, right.
yes. So the wasp sucking machine 1 was in 2011, and that actually did quite well. So when I had this wasp problem, so this is on this rural property that we later moved to, and I was out there and I went in the shed to get something and I got stung. I was like, "Argh!" And I didn't even have my good camera with me because I wasn't planning on filming anything. So I had my older camera that I used to film with me that I just used as a still camera with me, and I was like, what do I do now? It's like I have to, I am in the moment. I have to film this now. So I built this thing and used my old camera to film it. Most of it, like then when I came back after after I left the wasps in the box for a week, that was filmed with my good camera. But most of it, yeah, was shot with my just a little point and shoot camera. It wasn't even a very good one.
I think it's just satisfying to hear those wasps go choop, 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 get sucked up into that
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, bouncing through the hose.
Yeah. That's so weird. Did you get anybody complaining that it was like inhumane or anything?
Oh yeah, of course.
Did you?
Yeah, that goes same with the most videos. How cruel, blah 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 blah. And I'm like, I set a challenge for the mice. It's like the mice come through your house if they can, and they'll squeeze through whatever it takes to get at the food. And it's like, that's no different from I set a challenge to mouse. The mouse may or may not choose to try to get at the food, but it's no different from the mouse trying to make its way into your house.
Yeah.
Fortunately, there's no mice in this house.
Yeah. Well, that's good.
The perimeter seems to be mouse proof.
You mentioned this earlier about your second channel, and I wanted to ask you a little bit deeper into that is why not post these over on your main channel? Or was it just you were thinking, because you have like the mouse maze videos and things that I kind of have the feeling today you would put those on your second channel, but look how good they did on your first channel. And then I look at your second channel, which you've got like the fan, where to place the fan. I mean, you got almost 1 million views on that. I think if you had placed that on your main channel, you probably would have had 2 or 3 times that.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure at all. John Heist, is to the point where he thinks that a smaller channel will do better.
Mm-hmm.
I don't fully agree with him, but I don't think the bigger channel will do significantly better.
Right. And it comes back to that. How do you describe a big channel or not? If you're
So my 1.6 million subscriber channel, I'm not sure. The fan video could have possibly done worse on that one. So this is where going forward, I'll just separate things not by greater or lesser video, but by theme. Is it woodworking or is it not woodworking? And that fan video, I actually I built the apparatus for because I had to hack the anemometer to get the good enough readings out of it. So I made that video. That's the preceding one, and I sort of said, I'm not sure if the video that I'm actually going to shoot is going to be as interesting as this one. I wasn't expecting it to do as well.
The way you shoot your videos, though, you must get good retention rates on them because you start in with the video and then you just end it. You don't waste a lot of time.
I usually, for the initial surge, I get usually around 66% retention.
That's great.
Like where it sort of levels off. And then, of course, towards the end, when you do the outro or show the thumbnails at the end, that sort of thing, then it just sort of falls off a cliff. But Videos that older videos that keep getting views, those have much lower retention rates. So, for instance, my 26-inch bandsaw build series that I compiled into one video, I think it levels out around 15% or so. So maybe that's more typical.
Are you thinking about using any of the new YouTube features? You wouldn't do shorts, would you? You don't seem like a shorts kind of guy.
I'd rather it didn't exist. I feel kind of obliged. I should try that, and I've been meaning to. I just haven't had time to.
Yeah.
And this is, to me, it's an unnatural that they should do so well, because it's because YouTube is trying to muscle into TikTok space, and so is Instagram kind of thing. It's like the more distraction on mobile devices seems to be the trend of the future, and they want to be part of this too. So is this going to go the way of Google Plus, and that they invest lots into it and then eventually give up, or
I don't know. It could be. It could be real successful. They started the YouTube Shorts fund, $100 million fund they're paying out to creators now, but it's not associated with AdSense, and it's just like kind of whether or not they want to pay you to make them or not. So I've been doing a lot of shorts, and I got my first shorts fund payment out, $240. I'm going to Disneyland. So that's out of $100 million.
Ticket for one person or something?
Yeah, really. Exactly. I don't know. But I enjoy making them. Actually, we had a guest on our podcast, JJ McCullough, and he was talking about, he really likes using the shorts because he just sees it as a new challenge. And I think, to me, I do too. It's like this show to me is a new challenge, because a short, just to be able to summarize something in under 150 words, really, to get it under 60 seconds, is interesting. And he said, yeah, if YouTube came up with YouTube black and white, where that was you were constrained to only using black and white, I would still try it and see if there was some way I could make that work, because I love embracing the challenge. And I kind of thought about that. And I thought, I think a lot of people are hung up on thinking that it is TikTok. But I think what happens is that TikTok has a different culture than YouTube, whereas YouTube is more suited towards here's how you do something. Here's an interesting thing you can do. People have it in their mind that TikTok is all, just dance videos and these kind of things. But I think that there is room for it on YouTube if it's done right.
Yeah, so some videos, like my paintbrush cleaning video, where I clean the paintbrush with the bandsaw.
Oh, right.
I would shoot that as a short now.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Short certainly wasn't something that was in my mind even when I shot that. And that video, got, 30,000 views, and then kind of stalled out. And then suddenly it got over the course of a couple of weeks, it got another 300,000 views or something like that.
Yeah.
And now it's back down to nothing.
Interesting. Yeah, I can never really figure out YouTube. I know on those shorts, it takes about a week before all of a sudden they take off. They just flatline. They do nothing for a week, and then all of a sudden YouTube starts to promote them. And I guess that's where their mindset is right now. They just want to promote those. To me, it just seems like, I don't know, it's kind of part of my job to explore all the new stuff, whatever they have, and just see if it works, because otherwise it just kind of, I feel like I get stagnant.
I've been meaning to try the shorts thing. It's just there's too many other things to do, and I have half the time available that I used to have. So
I asked you this on I'm doing this other project, my documentary. If I ever get, that's a lot of work. But I asked you this then, and I'll ask you again. What do you think that? Do you think kind of project-based videos, woodworking videos, are kind of done? Not done, but it's harder and harder.
It's like, and I've heard so many people, and on your show too. It's just you're competing against so much stuff that's already out there. There's so many people doing it. They're relatively straightforward to shoot. Like if I'm doing a project, I know exactly what I need to. The plot follows the project. And if you're working on a project, it's also easier to be not nervous about what it's just logical. You've worked through the project. Whereas if I do some, even like the fan placement video, it's a bit more challenging to think about in terms of you really have to plan it through. Okay, I'm going to, what order should I do the different things in this video to make it work? And there's actually like that one is a bit out of order in terms of what I have in it, and I had to actually like voiceover, and there's a few bits extra that I shot in it in the end to make it consistent, which is not something I never have to do with a project video, because the project video, again, you just follow the progress. Whereas if I'm exploring something or explaining something, it's much more challenging to try to make that follow a plot, because there is no natural plot.
What do you think makes for a good project video that actually people watch?
Well, I think like the personality thing, like I watched a few Bourbon Moth's videos after I saw that. It's like they're not interesting to me in terms of learning anything, but he's kind of got a good narrative. I try this and da da da. He talks a fair bit, way more than I thought would be good for a video, but it's it's working for him. So it's personality driven. I don't know if you've in terms of personality driven, do you know about Electro Boom, that channel? So this guy, he used to be like a technician at some company, I think doing static testing and stuff like that. And one of his top videos is like how not to build an electric guitar, because he builds this crude guitar and he hooks up the strings directly to a power cord and strums it. And it's like the stuff is so personality driven, and his videos do really well. He does do some electronic related projects too, but again, it's very personality driven. But then if your project is personality driven, is it really about the project anymore?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what people are starting to discover, especially as there's more and more people doing woodworking videos that, there's only so many ways you can build kind of the same project. You got to bring more into it. So I think that the key is you got to have something really big or unusual, that people haven't seen before. And, maybe the huge slab epoxy table or something like that people who aren't interested in woodworking can watch.
And not everybody can. Yeah, it's like you like to watch these mega construction things and whatnot. And the other thing, of course, is it's like if you realize these mega epoxy slab countertops are big, it's like you're not going to build one of those because it's going to cost you thousands of dollars to do that. Which means there's fewer video. There's also less competition that way. For that.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that. Yeah, you got a lot less competition when you're doing something that's expensive.
Yeah.
I think that. What do you think is the biggest change you've seen over woodworking videos over the past 12, 15 years that we've been on the platform?
Well, the quality's gotten way better. How to is much less thing. It used to be Norm Abrams was sort of the standard of reference.
Yeah.
Have you watched a Norm Abrams show recently?
Not in years.
Unwatchable.
Yeah, I'll bet.
Like compared to the stuff out there now, that used to be better than YouTube, but now it's just like it just goes too slow, and and now I'm gonna cut dead dados here, and he cuts dead dados, and I'm like, that could be tightened up, tightened up.
Dissolved transitions and things like that slow it down even more.
Yeah, and so, and even like certainly my father-in-law, you see some of my videos, it's like, this is going way too fast if I wanted to build that. It's like, well, most people don't want to build it, and if you do want to build it, just watch it twice.
Yeah.
Or 3 times, because you don't have to get into that much detail. Most people already have a bit of a sense. So if you don't show the start of the cut, it's like people can fill that in.
Right.
Or if you don't show some of the cut, it's like, I cut these pieces square. It's like, you didn't need to see that.
Yeah, you can probably watch a Norm Abram video now, and you're probably watching it with that critical editor's eye, thinking, "Oh boy, I would trim a few frames off of that." Stop that saw cut there.
So yeah, like the quality's just gone way up.
Yeah.
And then I think partially first of all, it was a novel thing to watch how to do this sort of thing, but I think everybody's had their fill of it's like, your armchair woodworker's like, I think I know how that would go, even though you've never done it. You don't need to see somebody doing it again. So I think the audience has shrunk in that, the novelty's gone. Like, remember Facebook, the early days of Facebook, you'd find all your high school friends and friend them, and then there was the Facebook apps, and that novelty's gone. Like, they've had to move on to other things. So the novelty of how-to videos, I think, is gone. And then plus the sheer number of good how-to videos these days just makes it very difficult to make a dent on it. Although I said that I was emailing John Heiss, and he's like, no, it's not true. They still do well. And some of his how-to videos, which are extremely well produced, still do well. But I'm looking at some of these, it's like, yeah, you built this toolbox kind of thing, but it's like the amount of time that you had to put into this is like, I'm sorry, I
Right.
don't have that kind of time anymore.
Well, that's the frustrating thing, is to put in a lot of time on a project video, because then you're adding into not just making the video, but you have to actually make the project, which is just tons of labor. And then when people just aren't really that interested in watching it, it doesn't make financial sense if this is what you're doing for a living. And especially when there's, as far as how-to videos, they're already out there.
Yeah.
If you need to learn how to do something, there's plenty of them out there that are already done. So it's like, what more can you or I bring to the table, unless you're doing something like building a bandsaw? Not a lot of people are doing that.
Yeah. So to me, like, given some of those videos on my second channel that have done fairly well, so the one where I had to cut through my deadbolt, that had story to it. You're unlikely to encounter that, and if you do, you're unlikely to necessarily look for a video on that, but it did well. So it's more of a narrative kind of driven thing, or the fan placement one. So a big inspiration for some of that is, are you familiar with a channel called Technology Connections?
Yeah.
So, he takes the most ordinary things, researches them well. He doesn't even do any experiments. He just talks about them and explains things. And those work really well for him. So that, to move a little bit more in that direction, because some of the videos on that have worked very well. Of course, the problem is I'm always inclined to get too much into the science and measure things and stuff like that, which, most people just go, blah, 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 blah.
You just kind of check out when the numbers start coming on screen. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the future of your channel look like? Are you going to keep doing more big projects? Are you going to design any more tools?
I haven't got any tools in the plan right now. And in terms of the woodworking projects, like, that's more driven by needs.
Yeah.
So, like, I did a couple of beds. Like, I wouldn't have built those for YouTube. I built those because we needed them. So might as well film it. So that's the needs. Of course, that means the video doesn't necessarily have to do that well. So the woodworking projects, I think at this point, are primarily driven by needs.
Yeah.
An exception to that was the cap shooter that I built. That was kind of I just want to try that. Mm-hmm. It did okay. Not as that sort of thing. Like, going back 5 years, that would have gotten millions of views, and now not so much. It did okay. I was hoping for much better. Yeah, so it's more in terms of just exploring other sort of things, like the fan placement one. The tricky part is, for me, is like making it interesting to me and interesting to the viewer, which is a bit at odds, because the level at which these things are interesting to me is beyond a lot of the audience. And the things that perhaps are interesting to a lot of the audience, to me, it's like, oh my God, that's dead obvious.
Hey, that's my channel in a nutshell.
Yeah, I wish, sometimes I think it's like, should I do sort of like for beginners type of thing? My page about beginning woodworking, because I got that question so many times, is doing relatively well. So thinking about, should I make a video version of that? I haven't gotten around to it. That's another thing that I should do.
Well, it's probably getting a lot harder now that you've got kids.
Well, yeah, like the time I have available is less than half of what it used to be.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating quite often. It's like, it's 4:30 and I'm on a roll. It's like, time's up.
Right. Yeah. Well, cool. Hey, Matthias, it was great talking to you again. We're going to have to do this again. I'm going to start, bringing people back onto this podcast, and we can get more in depth in specific things. Thanks for watching, everybody.